Bum-ba-da-dum. Howdy, y'all. Welcome to BanjoBenClark.com. I'm Banjo Ben. Or maybe you're watching on YouTube or Facebook or wherever. I can't keep up with it all these days. We've got a great lesson today. It's a bag of licks lesson, everyone's favorite. We're going to learn some wonderful mandolin licks going from a D chord to a G chord. But we'll talk, after you listen to them, we'll talk about how they don't have to be used just for that context. In fact, I'm going to give you some examples of how to use them in many, many more contexts. So super duper useful. Let's roll those beautiful licks. Aren't those fun? Again, I'm going to talk to you about how to change those for lots of different keys, especially the closed licks, and how we can make them point to whatever chord we want. But I want to say something else before we dive into the instruction. This is actually my very first lesson on my new set here on the farm in East Texas, outside of Kilgore, Texas. I'm building a little cabin set. I'm not quite finished with it yet, but the videos have to keep coming. You know, I've given you a lesson essentially every week for over 12 years. I'm like the post office. I keep delivering. And just because we move and have a new location, there's no excuse for not getting you all a new lesson. So here's your new lesson. And if you're watching on the website, it's BanjoBenClark.com Gold Peak member, you can download the tabs for this and get rhythm jam tracks that you can practice along at different speeds. If you're not a member, I'm going to let you have a few of these licks, but then I invite you to come over to the website. Join as a Gold Peak member. You not only get this lesson, you're going to get hundreds of other lessons for mandolin, guitar, and banjo. Let's dive in. Let's learn some fun licks, y'all. These are D to G licks, but don't let that title mislead you, because these licks can be used over all kinds of chords, and they don't have to just go to G. We'll see how that works, but though the licks here on the tab are resolved back to a G chord, you can make it go wherever you want. You can keep it on a D chord just by changing the last note and where it targets. You can go to an A, whatever. So anytime that you're using or playing a song that's got a couple measures of D, these work great. And they don't even have to be a D chord. You could play it over an E chord and it would sound really, really bluesy. Also, even though they're two measures each, you don't have to just have two measures of D to play these. This would be great for a song that has one measure of D. And you can start this lick a little early, and maybe we can see how that works in some context. So I'm going to teach you a few of these licks, then we'll play them slow, talk about context, cover 3 or 4 of them at a time. The first one has a name. It's called circular down. What do I mean by that? I mean that we're going to use a circular scale. If you've learned those exercises on my site, the circular scale. Yes, they serve as an exercise, but also a wonderful lick. We're going to do it in reverse, starting with the A note up here. So that first measure is a circular scale, and then we're just going to go into more of a linear D scale lick. Again, wrapping up on the G note there. Okay, assuming that the rhythm's going to a G chord. If it's not, you can play another note to take you wherever chord that you want. That circular scale is neat because it travels down the scale 3 notes, then comes back to where it started, and then does it again, but starting 1 note lower. Very cool. The next one's called circular up. We're going to reverse that, do a climbing circular scale, and we're also going to introduce a couple notes that aren't in the D major scale. The first one, 3rd fret, that's a flat 3rd of a D major scale, so it gives a little flavor there. The lick sounds like this. We also did that slide. And so when we're going to a G chord in measure 7, let's say that's what we were doing, this sounds great because those 2 notes are pushing us towards the G chord. And it's a lot of fun to play a little bit ahead of where the song's going. And so it would work, all kinds of chords, but sounds particularly good going to a G. The next one is called flat 3 resolve. Now, whenever we think about our G major scale, we've got a third tone, 1, 2, 3, and it's an F sharp. We can find it there, we can find it up here. And whenever we flatten that to an F natural, we drop it down 1 fret. And we use that a lot, right? We're going to use that a lot in these licks. And the flat 3 resolve lick is going to take that a couple times, and it's going to resolve it in different directions. So we've got first time resolving up to the major third with a slide. You see that in measure 9? The second time we play it, just a couple notes later, we're going to resolve down to the major second by pulling off. And whenever we put those two elements back to back, I think it creates a wonderful sound. Sounds like this. Isn't that cool? And then for the second measure, we've got a triplet pull off. So I'm just plucking it once with my pick and then pulling off. All together. That one sounds great. Slow, fast, doesn't matter. So let's talk a little bit about using these, and this will apply to all of the licks that we're learning today. Remember, I told you that it's 2 measures of D resolving to a G, but don't let that imprison you for where you might be able to use these licks. Obviously, you can use it easily on a song that has 2 measures of D chord, no matter what key it's in. But let's talk about another context. Let's say that because this happens very often in bluegrass, that we have 1 measure of G. So let's take like a 9-pound hammer, for instance. There's a 9-pound hammer. It's a little too heavy. Here we go for my size, right here. Buddy, for my size. Just 1 measure of D. And so a lot of times, and this is something that can trip us up. A lot of times we think, well, we only have 1 measure D. So if I'm soloing, I've got to play a D lick over that 1 measure D. Not true. You can start playing D licks before you ever get there. And I have a lot of lessons on the site that teach you how to do this. But we can start playing it before we get there. So in bluegrass, a lot of times we have that 1 measure D turnaround. We can start playing these licks 1 measure before we get there so that the timing works out. So let's take the circular down scale, for instance. I'm going to start playing that the measure before we get to the D chord, and it'll work out great. So there's a 9-pound hammer. It's a little too heavy. Here we go. Buddy, for my size. Buddy, for my size. See how that works out? Same thing for circular up. There's a 9-pound hammer. Oh, that works great. Let's try it with the last one, flat 3 resolve. There's a 9-pound hammer. Oh man, that's so great. So don't let these licks don't let them pigeonhole you to where you're only going to use them over 2 measures of D or only going from D to G. Not the case. You can use them all over the place. You just need to stretch your boundaries a little bit. Okay, if you're watching here on the website, banjobenclark.com, we have 7 more licks. You got the tabs. You got rhythm tracks to download to practice them. If you're watching somewhere else like Facebook or YouTube, I'd be honored to have you come on over. You can download the tabs for this and hundreds more lessons. Let's keep going.